All right, welcome to our video on self-mastery, the meta skills that are crucial and common among people that have mastered themselves. Now, you're probably wondering, am I self-mastered? Well, I'm on the journey, I'm on the path. I've got a great process that I'm continually refining and proud enough about that I can share with you, or at least some things that I've learned. Now, I don't claim to be perfect, I don't claim to have all the answers, but what I do know are a few things that have really benefited me and some of the people that I've worked with. So, I wanna share them with you. And if you benefit from them, even just one, then I'm happy. Okay, enough rambling, let's get into today's video. Meta skill number one towards self-mastery. This is goal setting. Now, most of us are brought up with the idea that outcome-based goals are the way to go. For example, get straight A's or make $75,000 per year. But the trouble with these is that we don't have direct control over that outcome. That is really easily confusing the learning process and not allowing the behaviors that would lead to that to be rewarded in the right way. So what we want to do is bring back the scope of control to things that we can actually dictate, whether that's studying a certain amount of time or reading the right books or making the right amount of phone calls or sending the right amount of emails to eventually lead toward that destination. The reason we do this is because now when we reward the behavior, our bodies go, oh, okay, this is something worth repeating, and it's outcome independent so that you can actually gain on the statistical side of it and not rely on the external luck that you don't have any control over. So once we've shifted from outcome to behavior, then the most important thing here is consistency. And again, all within the guise of goal setting, consistency is the key, because a plan that you have that you don't execute on doesn't benefit you. But if you make a plan that you can actually do, that's when you'll start to get some benefit. Some benefit is better than no benefit. So if we can get some, then we can increase that amount, and that's how we'll get the longer term, bigger term benefit that we're after. The final aspect I want to touch on with goal setting really has to do with alignment within your ideal self. If you are not personality aligned with this, it's gonna be really hard to force yourself to do. Now, I get that in changing ourselves, we're changing our identity a little bit, and we're going from who we are to who we want to become. But that gap can't be so far off to just cause a break. I know most of us want to just immediately go there because we don't like the transition period, but we need to make sure that what we're trying to change within our personality, within our identity, is still within what we want to do, what means something to us. Not because someone else has said it or we think that, this famous person does that and that will be our ticket to a great life. We need to be true and honest with who we are and who we want to become, because that type of passion can't be snuffed out. Discipline is part of passion. It just doesn't seem like discipline because it's a lot easier to live true to who you are. Now, I know that sounds maybe corny and it's a lot easier said than done, but it's definitely worth stating. Meta skill number two towards self-mastery is prioritizing. Now, I learned from an article on James Clear's blog that prioritizing is actually not what it used to mean. Prior, like first, primary, used to mean one thing, prioritizing one thing. But now when we say it in our current context, oh yeah, that's a priority, but it is either the priority or it is nothing, okay? And what this really allows us to do is to strip away the stuff that doesn't matter. When you have your life prioritized, meaning everything from the values in your life, what you want to do with your time and attention, where you want to put that, once you have that understanding, then everything that follows becomes easier. Decisions that you confront become non-decisions because you already know, oh, I value this over that. I don't need to make another decision. I've already decided all of that. So that saves us so much mental effort from trying to decide and redecide things that we don't want to. Now, this requires some introspection, some self-discovery, some reflection, so that you actually understand what your priorities are, right? If you have priorities that are misaligned with who you are, then they're not going to be helpful to you. So we want to make sure that they're aligned with who we are, who we want to become, and how we want to lead our lives. This is also super helpful with simple daily to-do lists. Instead of having 20 things in no particular order, what you do is write everything down and then prioritize them so that it's 1 through 20. And then what you're able to do is get rid of 2 through 20 and just focus on that 1 until you get that done. And then what was 2 becomes 1. And everything just becomes that 1. We're kind of going backward into the original intention of the word. So you know when you're trying to focus on so many different things, you don't know where to put your attention because you don't have priority? This really organizes your mind, knows where to put your attention, how to focus on that thing, because these don't matter. They're not as important as the top priority. Now, once that priority is completed, the next one becomes there, and then the next one becomes there. And these aren't any longer taking up that bandwidth in the back of your brain going, hey, what about me? What about me? Because you've already done the thought work ahead of time, understanding that this is the most important thing for me to do until it's complete. This is really important. Just stop myself from going on a tangent about the Zeigarnik Effect. I'll put a little description in the description below. And this kind of leads me into the discussion about the lack of importance of time management, right? If you've seen some of my other videos, I kind of trash talk time management because it's not as useful as we think it is. Because what it does is artificially say, okay, this amount of time for this one, this amount of time for that one, and so on and so forth. But one, we usually misprioritize them. And two, even if they are prioritized and we stop one to just work on the next one before it's done, then it's gonna be running in the background and you don't want that excess bandwidth being used for something that you're not focused on, right? So it's really spreading our focus and attention thin when we want to be focusing on one thing at a time, okay? Single tasking, not multitasking. Meta skill number 3 for self-mastery is specific. Be specific in everything that you do, because clarity allows for organization, allows for clear boundaries on what you're doing, when you're doing it, why you're doing it. All of these, what were once ambiguous things that, again, keep that bandwidth in the background going, it quiets all that crap so that you can actually focus on what you want to do and get it done. If you don't know what the goal is, how are you gonna complete it? Am I supposed to make 10 calls or am I supposed to call people? Well, 10 calls sounds a lot more tangible, sounds a lot more achievable, because call people is so generic, so ambiguous that you could be calling your friend instead of making a sales call. And I guess I should have said 10 sales calls. But you get the picture, right? The clearer that you can be, the more specific that you can be in what you want to do and how you're gonna do it, the better off it is. In the same way, if you're directing someone else or asking them to do something for you, say, hey, will you give me that? What is that, right? That's way too generic. Hand me that specific spray bottle, that blue one that you see right there in front of you, 1 foot in front of your arm. That is very hard to misinterpret. Okay, and we speak with ourselves in ambiguous terms all the time. So the clearer that we can be, the better off we'll be. Now, in terms of habits specifically, where I see a lot of people break down is their behavior themselves. What everyone thinks is the easiest part. If you look at the habit loop, cue, routine, reward, some people have trouble with every aspect, but they almost overlook the importance of the behavior, the routine itself, because it seems so simple. It's like, oh, I'll exercise. But to your brain, all that is making this part of the pie. There's so much in here that it doesn't understand. So that ambiguity, 1, keeps you from starting, and 2, you don't know when you're finished. You don't know if you've actually completed your goal or not. So getting super clear, super granular on what we want to do and how we're going to do it is going to benefit us in so many different ways, which leads us to number 4 of self-mastery. Number 4, the meta skill of self-mastery, which is planning, okay? How you plan. Let's see, what's that beautiful quote? Planning to fail, wait, no. Failing to plan is planning to fail. This is a beautiful aphorism. The more that you can have thought out ahead of time, the more that you know exactly what you're gonna do, how you're gonna do it, why you're doing that as opposed to something else, the better off you're gonna be. Because the less decisions you're gonna have to remake or make on the fly in real time when you might not have the available bandwidth or the understanding of all the outside information. So if you can sculpt this space and time for you to think things ahead of time, look at what obstacles might come in out of nowhere and plan for the worst, plan for the best, and how you can lean into what's working and hopefully mitigate what's not before all this happens, before you get in this emotional frenzy, then you have a really sober-minded control over the situation and what you're gonna do at all these different points. This planning gives us confidence in pursuing what we want to and allows us the clarity to actually continue down that path because we know where we're supposed to go. We know what we're supposed to be doing and why that is the case. Once this thought work has been done ahead of time, everything else becomes easier. I just want to do a little bit more on the importance of using effort and willpower as opposed to time for planning. When we look at our prioritized list of things to do and we allocate our resources, our willpower to finishing that task, that's when we're gonna use our resources most effectively because we don't have that background bandwidth being used to thinking about all these other things that we could be doing. And a quick tip here, a way to get rid of that background bandwidth being used on things that you don't want them to be used on is to write them down. So if you have, say like, hey, do the dishes at 5:30 p.m. in the back of your mind, write it down on paper, put it in your phone, put it somewhere that you can rely on that coming back to you so that you don't have to keep it in your mind in the present moment. Planning is easy, executing is difficult. Should that be it? One of my favorite ways of planning is something I like to call the rate of improvement. So specifically talking about habits and their acquisition here. If we look at the typical approach, it's again, starting from 0 to 100, right? It's like, okay, I don't exercise at all now, 0. I wanna run 3 miles a day, 100. It's like, that's way too much to take on right now. So that's absurd. So what do? Well, we wanna start smaller, good. But now, if we still want to get there, like this is still our end goal, how are we going to go toward that? What's the rate of improvement? Actually, I should do it this way for the video. What's the rate of improvement that we're going to use that's going to be most sustainable and allow that momentum to be used to get us there? Again, this really comes down to maintaining the consistency, maintaining the momentum so that we're not biting off more than we can chew and we're not adding 15 lanes to a 2-lane highway out of nowhere. We need to go at that rate that allows for continual progression. Okay, so if, for example, we're going for a 3 mile a day end goal, we start with nothing. Let's go, hey, let's run for 5 minutes a day. If we do that for a few times in a week, then we'll move up to 6 minutes and then 7 and then 8. And then we'll go up using that really simple upper boundary so that we don't confuse ourselves and think that we need to just immediately jump to that 3 miles a day. Another important aspect of planning is planning to fail. And what I mean by that is having redundancies in place. For example, if you are someone who wants to morning exercise or exercise in the morning, but you might have things come up, then having an afternoon post-lunch or maybe after work exercise potential is a great redundancy for you to put in place so that if you miss the morning one, you already have a plan to do the afternoon or the night one. Because life does get in the way. As much as we want to control our environment and our lives, stuff happens. So the better that we can plan ahead of time, if this happens, then I'll do this, the better off we're gonna be. And I know that the more we want to do something, the more redundancies we should be putting in place so that we can actually do these things, right? If exercise is not that important to you, you don't need to have 15 redundancies for you to do it. But if it is, then that is something worth putting a redundancy in place for and having it planned out. Really simple, bright line rules. If this, then that. If this, then that. As much as we'd like to set the plan in the beginning, get all the thought work out of the way, stuff still happens, okay? So we need to be able to sidestep that, understand that this is not the perfect plan off the bat, okay? We're gonna need to adapt it, massage it, tweak it as we go, as other things in our lives change, so that this is something that can stick with us. If it doesn't adapt with us, it's not gonna be a plan we can execute. And again, if we can't execute the plan, then it's a bad plan. So let's create something that allows us to move with life, as opposed to just, here's what I wanna do, and then other stuff happens and you don't even do it. So think about how you can, in your life, not only anticipate what changes you might need to make so that you can do them first, but the flexibility you can exhibit while you look at your failures, you look at your non-successes and the times you don't do things, identifying why that happened, why things got in the way and what those things were, how to counteract those, so you can add that into your plan and bake it in so that you can succeed next time, or increase your chances at succeeding next time. That's all we really want to do, is continually increase our chances at executing our plans. When it comes to planning, implementation intentions are vital to their successes. Okay, so we need to know what we're doing, when we're doing it, where we're doing it, what the actual thing is itself, and even further, how we're gonna go about doing that. Again, back to the specifics, the more that we can plan up front, the better off we're gonna be. All right, the fifth meta skill to self-mastery is reframing. Okay, perspective shifting. If you look at all the top performers in the world, they can deal with adversity in so many different ways, because to them, it doesn't even seem like adversity. They get knocked off course, but they just go, oh, this is my new course. How am I gonna traverse it to get back on track to where I wanna go? How can I deal with this current situation or reframe it in a way that's going to most benefit me? It's the silver linings, it's the optimism in the face of crazy negative reality that can allow you to push through, to think another way, to outsmart the situation or someone else, so that you can bring yourself into that power position and really take control of whatever is going on.